Good morning, y'all, from the Meatbird Barn at Twin Oaks Family Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA. We're checking in on this flock of 434 Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens. And good news, bad news, but going to catch you up on last time we saw them, how long it's been since we saw them, changes we've made in their brooder space, and how they're progressing. So it was about 10 p.m. when we checked on the birds the night of their 5th day, and now it's about 8 a.m. the morning of their 6th day. So they went from about 10 at night to 8 a.m. in the barn undisturbed, and we had all 12 of the heat lamps on for them. So we've got those positioned there. The birds are still using them. Our temperature around the barn, as far as natural ambient temperature right now, is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So we would expect that they're going to utilize these heat lamps until the outdoor temperature warms up to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And probably at that point, they're probably going to move away from where the heat lamps are and not be using them. We've got doorways open, so we get a lot of natural light coming into the building, and we get good airflow so that we have great air quality and fresh air. So it's just a matter of working with the temperature fluctuations throughout the day. So you kind of saw some activity. Of course, they're aware that their flock manager, their handler, is in the building, so they understand that somebody's going to be in the pen at any moment working around them. I was going close up on a group of them there at a feeder. So we have a lot of feed in the pen, good water capacity in the pen. So overnight, they were able to get to food and water at will, and they were able to have their fill of it without depleting it. So now we're going to be filling everything up. So I'll want to fill all the feeders up and all the waters up. And so one thing we observe consistently, the way the pen is set up now, is that there's basically 2 rows of the waters. So the row of waters nearer to us is between the 2 rows of heat lamps. So of course, overnight when the temperatures dip outdoors, the birds concentrate under the heat lamp area, the targeted warmth area, in order to meet their temperature preference. And that's why we put 1 row of waters under there. Well, that row of waters is almost empty. Not quite empty. There's still a little bit of water in each tray, but those are more or less empty. Whereas the waters on the far side that aren't really incorporated into that area of targeted warmth, they're only about half empty. So we know that as the birds, concentrate under the heat lamps, they're going to most utilize resources that are also where that targeted warmth is hitting. So they've utilized more of the water in the middle than out of the edges. So actually, what we'll do about water is I have 5 additional, there's the trays, and there's the reservoirs. I have 5 additional waters sitting out. I'm going to actually fill 5 new ones, put them in the center to replace 5 of those that are way down. And then, well, actually what I'll do is put the fullest ones on the outside and move the half full ones inside, so that we're constantly trying to use up that water and keep that water supply fresh, and not let it become stagnant or something that's sat there a long time. So feeders, they've eaten the feeders down about equally. Most of the feeders look like they're eaten down to about half. So with those, we just have to, that's a flip top lid. So we unfasten it on one side, it flips open, we fill it, and then close it again and put it back where it was. And so this is the feed that we're using. Okay, so that's a crumble. It is 22% protein. We are going to keep them on 22% protein. We did make some changes in the brooder space the evening of their 5th day. One thing that we did is actually make the brooder space a little bigger, and I can actually show you some visual reference on that. So down here at this panel, we moved these yellow crates further toward the center of the building, so giving this brooder space more room. We moved them about 3 foot in toward the center of the building. So basically where that small piece of scrap wood is right there in the corner, from the end of it, that at the end of it is where the crates were previously sitting. So we moved the crates from the end of that over, okay, to expand this space, because they were just getting crowded with having the feeders sitting there and having all the waters in there and having those crates so close. And they've grown since day one, so they were starting to get crowded. So we wanted to give them more room. So there's a good close-up on a couple birds eating there. We still have quite a few birds at that yellow one in the corner. So that's why we put so many feeders and waters in here, though. We want the birds to have access to food and water at any given time. We don't want them to have to fight for resources. So they're looking really good. But day 6, and so I did some check-in our calendars. So clarifying on these birds, they were hatched on June 12th, 2024. They are going to processor on July 22nd, 2024. That was the date I thought, but I kept questioning myself because we were aiming for a 35-day production schedule this year. And I kept thinking, I know that's got to be longer than 35 days by a good bit. So we did check it out. The dates are right. July 22nd is their processing date, and that actually makes this flock out to 41 days. So I'm sure when we scheduled, it just had something to do with how the dates fell out, you know, maybe what day of the week the hatchery is hatching on, and what day we already had our processing set up on. But at any rate, that's the way this flock turned out, was 41. So that's actually more like what we're accustomed to. We typically raise them to 42 days. So that's going to be just like a 6-week-old flock without going over 6 weeks. So that's good. That's actually our personal preference for production length. We are aiming for 5 weeks whenever it worked out with the schedules this year, just to see how that turns out. We've done that with 2 flocks. We've been at 37 days and it turned out fine. We were pleased with it, but we're going to be happy with 41 days as well. The thing with Cornish rock cross meat chickens that you're trying to accomplish, I'm just going to slip this in here before we finish up talking about this flock, but the thing with Cornish rock cross meat chickens that you're trying to accomplish is 2 things. You're trying to maximize all the growth potential that the birds can produce, at the same time trying to minimize any flock loss, because flock loss does happen. It's possible in the realm of possibilities that you'll have a flock or flocks where you don't lose any birds. Yes, that is a possibility, but the more flocks you raise and the larger flocks you raise, it is very likely that there will be flock loss. And that can come from management practices, but the fact is it can also come from things beyond our control. There can be conditions during hatch that have to do with humidity and temperature that happen before the birds are on farm, that can affect the birds' organ function as they grow. Also, with these birds, even if they have a really great incubation time, prior to hatch, everything goes well in hatching, everything goes well in shipping, and you get them to your farm or your homestead, these birds just grow really fast. There's a lot of demand on the organs, there's a lot of demand on the skeletal structure, and there can be problems that lead to mortality. So it is, as I said, the more flocks you raise and the larger the flocks are, there is likelihood that you, as a manager of your flocks, will experience some flock loss. That is discouraging, but it's not something to let it cause you to give up on the project, because it does happen. And so we just need to assess it. If it happened because of something that we can change and influence and improve, then we need to make that adjustment. If it just happened and it's something that we could not have influenced, then we need to just go on and continue to take the best care of the rest of the flock that we can. So anyway, just putting that out there, but wanted to get that said. That's the point with meat birds. Those are the two main things we have to accomplish. We need to maximize growth potential, minimize flock loss. And so we basically see 3 phases of growth. You know, when they're starting out, we call them starting, because it's like getting them a good start, getting where the organs are all functioning and doing all their jobs, and the bird gets used to getting its water from the right place, the bird gets used to the feed that we have it on, the bird gets established in its environment, and we see changes in the bird like getting its feathering, and then it moves into the growing phase. And for us here, we interpret the growing phase as giving that bird time and nutritional support and environmental support to let that bird's skeletal structure attain all the growth that it has the capacity to attain. And then we get into a finish stage toward the end, like in our 6-week model, like the last 2 weeks, we get into a finish stage where basically, you know, the bird's organs have been functioning well, supporting its survival and growth, and then the growing stage gave the bird its skeletal capacity that it can attain, and then in the finish phase we see the bird really start to convert the feed to meat and really start to distribute that meat. And so basically at those 3 stages, the feed that we're giving them and the water that we're giving them, the nutritional support, the environmental support that allows rest and allows their routine, all of that feed and nutrition is going into those priorities at those stages, is why poultry producers would interpret the production length in those stages, start, grow, and finish. So, you know, in the beginning, as I said, we're seeing the nutritional value go to support getting them that strong foundation, that strong start with the organ function, with their feathering coming in and getting settled in their environment. And then in the grow phase, we're seeing that nutrition really go into developing that skeletal structure, maintaining good organ function. And in the finish phase, we're really seeing that nutrition support feed to meat conversion and seeing the meat distribute to the chicken breasts, drumsticks, and thighs. And that's why we see a lot of feed consumption in the beginning and then even a higher rate of feed consumption at the end. And that's why we see a lot of rest in the beginning and even more rest at the end, because the birds are growing fast in the beginning and growing faster as the production continues, okay? And then that's why like about 6 weeks is kind of that sweet spot on production, because then at that point, at a certain point, you kind of reach a threshold where the bird is getting as much feed to meat conversion as possible out of the feed. And then the bird will continue to have a heavy appetite, but the rate of growth will kind of plateau. And that, you know, that may be out at like 7-8 weeks or something. But that's just as an example to kind of explain why we don't want to go beyond 6 weeks. So you can see here, as we mentioned, the birds really are still utilizing the heat lamps. They are utilizing all the heat lamps. They're pretty evenly spread out throughout the pen. We do have, I think, more birds up on this end than that end, but every pen tends to be like that. Now, I do see over there, we've got a pile of them. So as I work in the brooder space, I'm going to ask those birds to move, and they'll make their way over here somewhere. And then that's another feature that's different in the pen. We put a piece of scrap wood there to block out that corner, because the birds were just going back into that corner. There's no targeted warmth there. We don't have as much bedding down there in that corner, and we just wanted to block off that space. We don't want them using it. We want to encourage them to stay over to this space. Even though they were filling it and getting crowded and we had to give them more room here, it doesn't benefit them to have that corner. So the other thing that we did when we added that corner block in there is we distributed an entire bale of pine shavings throughout the brooder space, under the lamps and under where the feeders and waters are. So as we're wrapping this one up, I am going to finish recording, then go into the pen and fill waters first, replace waters, make sure they're all filled, and then fill feeders, and then leave the birds alone for a couple hours and check back in on the lamps to see if we need to turn them off in a few hours. So they have completed 100 pounds of feed now. We're on our third bag of feed, so it took 4 days for them to consume the first 50 pounds and 2 days for them to consume the second 50 pounds, basically. And so now we are moving on into, they've been here about a week, almost a week. Wednesday will be a week, and then we'll be moving into the start of their second week. So they are doing good. Oh, and I did say we had good news, bad news. So the good news is, you know, they've grown enough that they're consuming adequate amount of feed. They've grown enough that we expanded their space, and we have the resources to continue to support that growth. The bad news is we are down to 433. We did lose one. It looked like failure to thrive in terms of heart distress. It was not a runt bird. It was a good sized bird, but we could tell that there was distress, and it looked heart related. So we made intervention for that bird and kept it as comfortable as we could until it passed of natural causes. So that was the bad news, but I think this one must be trailing a bug here or something. So we are at 433, but it was, what did we say? We're 6 days in, or today's the 17th, so they start on the 12th. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So actually on the 6th day, then, you know, that's just one in the first 6 days out of 400 plus is reasonable. It is reasonable. So that does happen. But anyway, they are doing good. They're really, really growing. And we do still have a few runts in there, but hopefully they'll be able to catch up and continue to thrive. So far so good. So we'll finish looking here at this group that's still at this feeder, and then we'll keep you posted on the birds day by day on how they're doing. Thanks y'all for joining us. God bless you.